Greetings, friends, and welcome to Storytelling Hour here at the School of Earth Astrology with your host and celestial navigator, Gemini Brett. Starting just a bit late today, but first announcement, and I'll say this again later on. Storytelling Hour is going to shift to 11:33 a.m. Pacific because our baby Maya has just started music together class, and I thought the schedule was going to align so I could get here just kind of perfectly in time for Storytelling Hour. And not only is that not true, but I don't want to be racing home with baby and mama in the car. So we're going to go back to 11:33 a.m. I will do what I can to kind of schedule it in advance, so those times are up and clearly displayed wherever you are tuning in. Well, whenever you are tuning in case you're not live, I guess I should say that today is Wednesday, Miraculous Mercury's Day, January 15th, 2025. The Israel fire, interesting. The California fires, the Los Angeles fires have been burning for more than a week now. I mean, Israel fire, interesting, like kind of a Freudian slip there, because I was just tuning into ceasefire in Israel. And I do want to keep our attention on LA today. I really don't want Storytelling Hour to become a thing of mundane astrology, which means like the astrology of world events. I think there's plenty of astrologers doing that. Kind of reserve the right to share what I'm fascinated by. I might at some point choose to start sharing content that would maybe be a better fit for what everybody wants to see. So that being said, I'm always interested in your comments, right? What would you like to learn more about from an astrological point of view, or gaze at together through an astrological lens? I'm just bringing up some charts now because there, from what I've found so far, seem to be a few different charts that are in use for Los Angeles. Many are using the chart of when Los Angeles was incorporated as a city. But before that, it was un ciudad. And before that, el pueblo de Los Angeles. And so there's charts actually for three different kind of official Los Angeles moments. So I thought a thing that we might do together to start is just to look at these three charts and see which one of them feels most Los Angeles. So in this moment, when I think of Los Angeles, I think of prayers, blessings for people there who are displaced, afraid. Some have lost lives, some have lost family members, some have lost homes, possessions. And I also think of gratitude, to just count my blessings to be in a safe place. And I also think safety. I also live in California, in the northern California or central Bay Area of California, where we've had many fires in recent years. And frankly, there's some brush that could be cleared and those kinds of things. So why not take some personal action and not wait for government to do it all for me? But if I take myself out of the present moment and try to rewind before all of this terrifying events started recently, and also we can say in recent years, as we know, there's been many California fires, there's been many global fires, catastrophes, there's many fires in Los Angeles over recent years. But if we kind of take ourselves out of that, so I'll invite you to do that if you can and will or are willing to. And if you are, I would just ask you to put in the chat, what are the first things that come to mind? Generally speaking, if I asked this of you 2 weeks ago or 5 years ago, when I say Los Angeles, you say what? What is Los Angeles to you? What is the spirit of Los Angeles? Some of you will live there. Some of you not anywhere close. I see friends here from Mexico, New Zealand, from Athens, Greece. Hello. I see Owner here from Turkey. Great astrologer, brother of mine. Owner, I would love to know what you have to say about this topic, and I should probably tune in to one of your many active channels because I imagine you've taken a glimpse. But let's see. So Discerning Light says home. Yeah, and Discerning Light, if you are there now, I hope you are okay. I hope you feel safe. I'm sure you have friends who have at least been displaced, if not you yourself. And I hope you're able to breathe and be okay. I just talked to a couple of friends yesterday who both lost homes. It's interesting to hear. Rosie says Hollywood and movies. So feeling like it's kind of like a Leo area, right? Celebrities. The music industry, right? I mean, there were times when the music industry was well centered in New York. I should say the American music industry. I mean, there were times when a lot of American music was born in New Orleans or St. Louis, Kansas City. You know, if you're a jazzer, you know what I mean. New York City, you know. But Los Angeles kind of became this headquarters of all things pop, didn't it? So Disneyland might be a thing that comes to mind for some. We hear one here, two different cities, elitist, entitled, and also very real and diverse. Yeah, and there's a question that I just hear in response to that. Maybe the elites are also part of diversity. I don't know that I would go there, but there you go. Plastic Beauty, we hear here, Rodeo Drive, the City of Dreamers, the American Dream sold to the youth for decades. Yeah, interesting. So, well, what is that American Dream? I mean, I feel like the Hollywood, and maybe that's different than Los Angeles, but I feel like the Hollywood version of the American Dream is pretty different than just the American Dream. Entertainment and music industry, an agreement for plastic surgery. Homelessness, interestingly, right? That's said by someone who resides in San Francisco, by the way, which is pretty fascinating since San Francisco often these days might have that reputation too. Sunshine. I gotta say, I think that surprised me when I found my way to Los Angeles in recent years. Is that there's this deep spirituality. And actually speaking with people who've been around for a bit, it's like, hey, that's nothing new. Like a lot of people were coming out to California and connecting with the spirit of the ocean, the spirit with nature, the spirit with more open lands, a vastness, a freedom. I mean, the whole movement west, right? Now, of course, there were people here before, right? And actually, some of the charts that we're going to look at for this place called Los Angeles, right? Obviously, a Spanish name, like they're going to be Spanish times. And I don't have times for when a place called Los Angeles or whatever was in that place was founded or, celebrated or whatnot, right? But yeah, I don't know. I kind of had always thought of LA as, well, kind of fake. And so we heard some of that in some of your comments as well. And then I found myself very surprised, when I went down there and it wasn't only people wanting to become a star or, get big with their music career. Um, and I'm not only talking, some of the pop stars in the Church of Scientology and the like, but, just really seeing people connect in with astrology, with meditation, with on and on we go. It's interesting, like Yogananda found his way from India to LA, right? Um, so part of the trick of looking at these different charts and asking which one of these might be more relevant towards the energy that is Los Angeles, we have to feel what is the energy of Los Angeles. And already we are getting a kind of variety of feels of what LA is to you, right? I mean, as it should be. And I gotta say, LA is a very different thing to me in, I don't know, the last 10 years than it was the 10 years before that, and also when I was a kid. Well, for me, I guess my first experience of LA was through my dad's radio and the Beach Boys, right? Like, it was that even LA when it was LA. Um, all right. Nadine writes here, Lotus Land is a wonderful book about the origins of Los Angeles. Interesting. Lorelei says, born and raised there, left at 17 years old in 1964. Air pollution was bad then. I saw many changes in that area. Yeah, that's an intriguing thing. Like, I grew up in Las Vegas, not so far away. I moved to Vegas when I was 5, 6 years old. And so LA would be this road trip. Um, and I remember going there in the 80s and it was just smog. I mean, it's not like the traffic has lessened at all. But I mean, it's a kind of testament for the significant technological advance in the ways of automobile emission. If you saw Los Angeles in the 70s, 80s, you know what I'm talking about. Discerning Light says Southern California is the most concentrated area of acupuncturists. Okay, cool. Let's take everything that we just heard, or maybe those of you who contributed a specific thing, want to now translate that to something astrological. Let's go very simple. So if you're going to say Los Angeles is a planet, which planet is LA? If you were going to say Los Angeles is a sign, which sign is LA? I will offer you as well the opportunity to contribute your response in like a planet sign combination or a planet planet combination. Let's just not go too extreme. So Rosie says Neptune and Pisces, which is what Winter says as well. For Nadine, Mercury, Leo, and Gemini. And Leo, and Jupiter. Interesting. I guess I should have asked a little bit of why. So if you want to follow up with that as well, it'd be nice to check in with community here. Linda says Aquarius. Interesting. Why Aquarius? I'm especially interested in that response. We hear Discerning Light as well, who's lived in LA for some time, that Neptune pops into. Mars and Neptune in Leo, says Lorelei, getting more specific here. Uranus in Pisces. Venus in Leo. Venus in Leo, that's interesting. Like two back to back, responding in the same minute, which is 11:28 a.m. Pacific time here on Wednesday, Miracle Ace Mercury's Day, January 15th, 2028. Cast a chart. What happened right then? Dreams, creativity, diversity, illusion, delusion, escapism. So I assume that goes with Neptune or maybe Pisces. 55 years so far, discerning light. I'm guessing that means you've lived in LA that long. I guess people, please type in complete sentences, right? Because I need to catch your like brief comment with one that you posted before, and I might not be as Gemini as I proclaim. Big and more, Jupiter, Leo for the limelight and showmanship. So real, not Brody. Interesting, saying Venus more as a guidance of Taurus rather than Venus Libra. Right, so that's interesting. It's cool to make that distinction as well. What would the difference be, right? Venus and Taurus more about the material, embodied, sensual, right? Beauty, elegance on one level, where Libra would be more of the relational aspect. So we hear, oh, so this is in response to why Aquarius from Melinda. My friends are very humanitarian like, volunteering and helping one another out a lot. So I saw an actor who's very like red side of the divide. If you know you're tuning into the division waves that Empire wants you to now, right? And he was saying, yeah, and so a neighbor of mine, 5 horses, and she was terrified, and so we helped out. Somebody was like, why would you help her? She's super blue. He's like, this isn't like about red and blue, right? This is like neighbors, friends, people, right? So I appreciate that. And that is, I mean, one of the potential gifts wrapped in the terrible paper of catastrophe like this is a coming together. Here's one to express more of why Neptune. So movies and entertainment, Neptune, Pisces, dreams and illusions. Leo, shining sun, fun and creative and over the top. Neptune, Pisces can also apply to the underside of Hollywood. Yeah, homelessness, by the way, there's a lot of disillusionment there, obviously. There's also tons of addiction in this, yes? And addiction in Los Angeles aren't new. And yeah, some of the hope, dreams, things that can also, on its other side, look like nightmares, certainly not new in LA. On one level, I'm kind of thinking of Manson and the like. But yeah, some of the whispers and rumors about what's happening in hidden places in Los Angeles. So, all right. Well, let's look at some of these charts and see what fits there. Wow, here we have one Virgo Mercury, fast and perfectionist. Interesting. Yeah, so it's really intriguing to see how different people see a place, right? Or a person. Like, it's really intriguing. Like, if I wanted to try to rectify somebody's chart based upon their vibe, well, it's so completely based upon how I see them, or if I'm asking people about it, right? So it's really cool to have so many amazing folks like yourselves all contributing. We get to see this variety, although we also get to see some similar themes coming in, right? Julie writes, morning from New Zealand, Leo, heart and courage would also mean Venus there. But we get a lot of like kind of Neptune, Pisces. Oh, here's a different image of Aquarius, or at least Uranus, so like cutting edge. A huge piece of Los Angeles that was before my time is like McCarthyism, right? So that's an interesting thing to consider, right? If you look at just, some of the old detective films and whatnot, you get a very different beat on LA. All right, cool. So let's take a peek. Gotta say, with like the amount of traffic in LA, what is that? So when I'm hearing fast, 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 I agree Mercury's the fastest planet, but it also makes me think of Mars. So does like the road rage. When you're stuck in traffic, that's more of a Saturnian experience. But the idea that everybody's like going somewhere, there's kind of that like Aquarian beehive vibe going on, but maybe not, because are everybody working together towards a common dream? Oh, Ava, or maybe something else I don't know how to pronounce. You just wrote Aries, and I'm wondering why. I'm going to check back in as I just go over and look to another stream here. One very important agreement. Yeah, this isn't about red or blue or black or white. Together we stand. This has to be an opportunity for us to come together. We have one here. So I would have said Virgo, and so I really want to know more of why Virgo. Elegance question mark. This is not LA, someone says. I don't know. I mean, look, elegance is a very subjective term, isn't it? We get one here, Venus conjunct Neptune in Leo. Interesting. Dreams and no locals. People moved in from other places. I mean, you could say that about the entire United States, but, there are plenty of people in Los Angeles who were also born in Los Angeles, so maybe that wasn't as true some generations ago. But that's an interesting point or experience, reflection. Be nice to kind of contemplate what that might look like astrologically as well. Someone writes, amazing how no trees were burned in this forest fire. And while Scorpio Brett would love to jump all over that, I think I'm going to keep us out of some of the conspiracy spaces now. All right, well, let me just check back in with comments over here, and then we'll look at some charts together. Oh, Aries. On one level, a response to why Aries is me, 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 me. Yeah, I wonder. George Harrison's I, Me, Mine comes to mind. So, by the way, George Harrison, Pisces, Venus, George Harrison guiding a Libra rudder. He wrote Blue Jay Way. There's a fog upon LA. But also George wrote I, Me, Mine, right? And I'm sure some of that was just upon reflection and some of the spirituality and contemplations and meditations he was led to, Maharishi and otherwise. But I wonder if that was a reflection on just the times or on anywhere in particular. George lived in LA for some times, founded the Traveling Wilburys there. Yeah, I mean, Melanie responds, by the way, that lots of trees burned in Topanga. Yeah, I mean, I've seen videos of tons of trees burning myself. So frenetic place, lots of extreme shadow and light we hear. Okay, loving both of those George Harrison tunes. I'm sorry, I can't do them justice, but at least you can hear them in your head. Yeah, lots of dreams, right? So there was another Aries response, by the way, like cutting edge, right? Going first. Okay, well, in one of these charts, we're going to see tons of Aries. So I was interested to see that presented. Now, I want to bring us first to this article that I found my way to. So we can kind of see where these charts came from. Let me get this window shared on your screen. This 1835 decree made the pueblo of Los Angeles a ciudad and California's capital. Okay, so it says grand pageantry marks each September 4th in Los Angeles the traditional, if not actual, anniversary of its 1781 founding as a Spanish colonial pueblo. I'm interested in just seeing what happens when we click on that September 4th link. Happy birthday, Los Angeles. But is the story of the city's founding a myth? September 4th marks the traditional anniversary of the 1781 founding of El Pueblo de la Reina de los Angeles, the town of the Queen of the Angels. Interesting. Pardon my terrible accent, Espanol, everyone. In a scene that's reenacted each year by descendants of the Pueblo's original colonists, the 44 founding townspeople marched on September 4th, 1781 as a group from Mission San Gabriel Archangel to the historic Los Angeles Plaza at the southern end of Olvera Street. There, Governor Felipe de Neve welcomed the procession and presided over a lavish ceremony commemorating the town's founding. It was a celebration worthy of the birth of a great city. Except that none of it actually happened. All right, so I'm going to read the rest of this on my own time. I wish I had in advance so I could maybe summarize this. So I've seen some astrologers working with this 1781 chart. We're going to see an interesting thing there. Pluto was in early degrees of Aquarius. Okay, well, let's go back to this first article I opened up. Fewer remember April 4th, the date in 1850, when Los Angeles incorporated as an American municipality, several months before California achieved statehood. So let's click the April 4th link. lahistory.tumblr.com, etc., etc., etc. On April 4th, 1850, Los Angeles was incorporated as a U.S. city. Official California statute. What was known as Pueblo de los Angeles had become the city of Los Angeles. Some note that Los Angeles became a U.S. city before California became a U.S. state. In 1950, Los Angeles Mayor Boron, dressed as a gentleman of the early days, led the festivities celebrating 100 years as a U.S. city. And while April 4th, 1850 can be considered one birthday, Los Angeles also celebrates its founding on September 4th, 1781. All right, this April 4th, 1850 date is used by many astrologers. It's the one that shows up at in the Astro Data Bank. So if you find that chart at astro.com, for example, that's what you're going to see. But here we have another date offered up. And by the way, none of these have times. City seems to have completely forgotten another weighty legal anniversary, May 23rd, 1835, when the Mexican Congress promoted Los Angeles from the rank of pueblo to ciudad and made it the territorial capital of Alta California. I mean, I wish I knew more of the history, by the way. Again, it would be very interesting to know about things that happened before 1781 in this area. I'm tempted to go look at when Sacramento was named capital of California, seeing that at times, at least for Mexico, Los Angeles was the capital of like Southern California. There was a different capital for Northern California. And then I think they kind of brought those two together to avoid some conflict between the two. I remember reading. I'm going to put this link at PBS Social regarding the 1835 date with the links to those other articles in the chat in case anybody wants to refer back to that later. All right. So let's look at charts for these dates. And see if any of them feel right. Now, again, we don't have times for any of them. All right, so we'll go with the oldest one first. Here's the 1781 chart. Because we don't have a time, I cast 12 p.m. That's going to get, for example, the moon midway from where she was at 12 a.m. and 12 a.m. the next day. Now, that being said, remember how quickly the moon moves, right? Moon moves on average 13 degrees per day. This is a slow moon. I can tell because she's with Lilith, which means the moon is far from Earth and therefore slow. But that's still like 12 degrees per day. And that means that this moon started this day, if you believe days start at 12 a.m. on a clock, in the sign of Pisces. Right? So that would be one way where this chart would give us some Pisces, okay? Now, what do folks notice in this chart? You know what? I want to share this in a different way. So pardon me stopping that right after I asked you a question about it. But I want to share this in a different way so that we're able to look at the chart together and I can see your comments here. So please don't talk about houses. This is a houseless chart. Pay no attention to those numbers on the inside circle. We do not have a time here. All we have is this date, all right? So it's not Aries rising. It didn't happen at 12 p.m. We don't know when it happened, all right? According to that one article we just glanced at, it didn't happen anyway. But what are and by the way, I would suggest you also be careful with the placement of the moon, right? The moon would have moved from the last degrees of Pisces around 12 a.m. and gotten to about 11 degrees Aries before the end of this day. Okay, so when you look at the strong opposition, for example, between Moon and Neptune, or the sextile with Moon and Pluto, or the square with Moon and Uranus, just be really careful with that. We just don't know. Okay, so when we don't have a time chart, you need to be particularly careful with the houses. There are no houses, there is no rising sign. And you need to be most careful with the moon and also look to see if planets have changed signs recently. And we don't have that, right? So we need to be careful of the moon's placement and also aspects to the moon, okay? So if anybody says houses, I'm just not going to read it. There's no houses. All right. So things jumping off like Aya Floyd. Oh, wow. I think I called you Eva and Ava before, but now I'm reading a Y. So maybe Aya. And pardon me if I have that pronunciation completely off. But pointing out this Venus-Neptune conjunction. All right. I'm also noticing that Venus is far from the sun. She's definitely not as far as she gets. But this is a very bright Venus, and I have to click on Venus to see how fast Venus is to know whether this is Venus about to turn retrograde or not. And by the way, the answer is she's not. That's a very fast Venus, a degree and almost a quarter per day. And so it's at a time in the Venus cycle when she's growing in light, separating from Earth's point of view from the sun, kind of getting bigger, brighter. At least I should say brighter. So yeah, I mean, Venus has some interesting connections. There's a Venus-Saturn sextile. There's a Venus-Pluto trine, a Venus-Uranus square, Venus-Neptune conjunction. All of that, of course, is going to depend upon what you feel or believe in your astrology should be the, boundaries for orbs of aspects. But we do see Venus, generally speaking, quite close to Neptune, about 3 degrees away, right? 3 degrees, about 3¼ degrees from Neptune. And though Venus had already passed Neptune by, still shining from Neptune's side. And there's something that can feel very Los Angeles in that, right? Some of you actually even called out a Venus-Neptune together. Now, I think you said in Leo. And one of you is speaking about Venus more on the Taurus side than on the Libra side. Marketing would be more of a Libra thing than Taurus. Look, marketing would be more of a Mercury thing than a Venus thing. Anyway, at least marketing in word and strategy. But in Venus, it's certainly like, the beauty of marketing and the branding, the look and vibe feel, right? So there's something there. And I think just in the kind of city of dreams, that Venus-Neptune feels like a good fit. I mean, it almost feels like this moon here at 12 p.m. is kind of spot on. And I'm just remembering that article, I think, did say something about that parade. Let's read that again. Governor Felipe de Neve welcomed the procession and proceeded over a lavish ceremony. It just says the townspeople marched on that day. But later on, I'll actually read more of this. I'll put this on the screen so you can read along with me. Because this is this article that's questioning this September 4th, 1781 date. So down here, like Romulus and Remus, if you know, that's the mythical founders of Rome who were raised by wolves and competed for their city's name. Guess which one of the twins won? Their competition was based on augury, by the way, divination of bird. All right, so the traditional narrative has proven to be more myth than fact. The original pobladores arrived separately at Mission San Gabriel, Archangel. Some settled the town site as early as June 1781. And September 4th was likely an arbitrary date that Neve used in his report to his superiors, one that was marked with little pomp and circumstances. Okay, but still, there's a report to the superiors, right? What makes a city, right? And this gets into that, the root of city. It sounds pretty dang close to civilization. Some of you will have a better command of language and etymology than me, but there's something in that, right? Like, what makes a place a place? And by the way, on some of the slower moving happenings a couple of months before, in June of 1781, certainly we would still have Neptune in Libra. We would still have Uranus in the sign of Cancer. We would still have Pluto in the sign of Aquarius, which becomes, of course, most interesting now since Pluto has recently returned to Aquarius for the first time since back then. And the Constitution of the United States, by the way, in 1783, Pluto in Aquarius. Declaration of Independence in 1776, Pluto in later degrees of Capricorn, right? It's been a common investigation by astrologers in recent times that the tropical return of Pluto, I should say, the return of Pluto in tropical Capricorn degrees. And Pluto's not yet here. I just want to take a look at something real quick. So if we look right now, Pluto currently at 1.5 degrees Aquarius. We can go back to January 7th, which is the beginning of the Pacific Palisades fires in the morning. And it's interesting to see things like the sun at that time was on the Mars of the September 4th, 1781 chart. It's interesting to see the moon that day transited this chart's node. It's interesting to see Mars then retrograde, coming to oppose Mars because of its retrograde motion. It's interesting to see Mars squaring the nodes, right? A lot of this is just going to depend upon, like, the parts of the chart that you believe have most relevance. I mean, a big piece here that also seems very relevant to this chart. Look at how in this chart we have a Sun-Saturn square, right? So a very significant structure there. And look, whether this was at 12:01 a.m. or 11:59 p.m., the sun's going to be within a degree or half a degree on the other side of this mark. So this is a very strong Sun-Saturn square. And at this time, what's happening, Jupiter and Saturn are square and aligned to those same mutable degrees where this Virgo sun in this September 4th, 1781 chart and Sagittarius Saturn on that chart live, right? So this square of Jupiter and Saturn in kind of real time or recent time, then creating a circuit of a grand cross or a grand square with the Sun Saturn in the LA chart. And that seems rather relevant to me. In regards to Pluto, if this is the chart, it might say, hey, well, I guess Pluto starts taking effect within 1.5 degrees. I'd be careful with that because such a statement would suggest that a Pluto transit's going to live for a long, long time. And look, maybe outer planet transits should be offered kind of a wider time scale for activation of something that's going to live longer than a human does, like a city, most cities anyway, right? So maybe Pluto should have 10 years versus 2 for a transit when we're looking at it in a chart of a country or a city. I don't know. But look, for any of you who studied alchemy, you know the calcination, the burning, like that's not the transformation, that's the beginning of the thing, right? So a big question is, well, what is Pluto going to transform into? And again, Scorpio Brett has a lot of questions about, oh, is there an intention for a better LA that maybe would have even inspired crazy people to start the process in this terrible way? I'm just going to leave that there for now. All right. Anyway, let's look at when the Pluto realignments are, at least in the tropical zodiac for the September 4th, 1781 chart. And answers to that question or interest are March 10th, 2026 in retrograde, like the retrograde motion of Pluto at the time. We get July 4th, 2026, interesting date of a year as far as an American city goes. It's interesting to see Neptune opposite this 1781 Pueblo de Los Angeles Neptune at that time. Neptune and Pluto, so configured by sextile, kind of coming to the Neptune-Pluto trine in this chart. Mars and Uranus. So it's like a pretty intriguing date. July 4th, 2026. Pluto will return a third time along with Mercury, January 15th, 2027. And with Pluto, you either get 3 or you get 5. In this case, we see 5. So we also get October 3rd, 2027, also in retrograde. Saturn at the node again. Neptune still with Neptune. Mars with Jupiter. And then a 5th Pluto return, at least in tropical placements, on Halloween, All Saints Day, Dia de los Muertos, right? Or at least the eve of this. October 31st, 2027. And I'm looking at Mars, where Saturn was back at this time. I'm looking at Neptune still like fully configured. Well, if this is the chart, what would we say when we push transits for now? And by the way, maybe we want to look at, oh, I don't know, progressions. Well, how about solar arc directions? Just because I clicked that button first. This is intriguing. If you don't know about solar arcs, let me start with the progressed sun. By the way, if you haven't seen this button yet on Astro Gold, update your software. It was just released and it's awesome. Been testing it for some time along with some other amazing things that are just now available in the new update for Astro Gold software for Mac OS. Don't sleep on it. The maps are amazing. All right, so secondary progressions for now. Dope. And what are secondary progressions? We turn days into years, all right? Now, in the case of a human life, you're never really looking at more than 100 days, so 100 years, right? But this has been many years since that time. I'm going to let the computer do the math for me. Yep. 2025 minus 1781. Dope. 244 years. So we're looking at a chart for about 200 and that many days after the September 4, 1781 time. And we see some intriguing things like Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. We see some intriguing things like Venus opposite Neptune, right? Starting with Venus at Neptune and now Venus opposite Neptune, coming into this square with Uranus, for example, right? So one of the things that we utilize these many timing techniques for in astrology is to, predict what might be coming, align our own intentions to the energies available. And another thing that they're often used for is for rectification, right? Trying to help determine a a time of a birthday. Now, determining which of these 3 dates, that's a whole nother story, right? But anyway, I'm going to go back to solar arc direction, something that came out of the German schools in pretty recent times of astrology. I just want to point out to you that if you look at the secondary progressed trine or sun, it's about trine to the natal sun, right? So that means that it's about 2/3 of a year from the time that we've considered. Well, this is called the solar arc. How far has the secondary progressed sun arced from the natal sun? What solar arc directions do is they just apply that same arc, which is like trine plus 3 degrees. Well, let me say 243 degrees, right? A trine and a trine in 3 degrees. So like 243 degrees. They're going to do that to the entire chart. And there's this fascinating thing there now. Now, I got to say, I ignored this timing technique for some time because it's astronomically obnoxious. Well, for example, the moon and the sun are never going to move at the same rate. But since I've come to utilize more of the Hellenistic kind of fractal timing techniques that also have no astronomical rhyme or reason, I've softened to this. I've also seen second solar arc directions at times really speak to things that I had a hard time seeing in a transit chart, including recent eclipse activations or otherwise, that I had a hard time seeing in secondary progress charts or in profections and other fun old school techniques like zodiacal releasing or circumambulations. We're not going to be able to do either of those here, by the way, because they both require gnosis of the ascendant degree, or at least the ascendant sign in the case of zodiacal releasing, depending on your religion. All right, let me leave all that aside and just say, in the arc chart, it's pretty intriguing because we see Pluto arced to Venus, right? So you can see Pluto 2 trines and 3 degrees away from where Pluto began. We also see things like when you see a sign change in solar arc, it's particularly interesting. You might see this as Venus opposite Saturn. Typically in solar arcs, we only give half a degree of orb on either side, because since the secondary progressed, which is turning days into years, since the secondary progressed sun moves at a rate of about 1 degree per day. Sorry, the sun moves at a rate of about 1 degree per day. So the secondary progressed sun moves at a rate of about 1 degree per year, right? So a solar arc direction moves everything at the rate of about 1 degree per year. So if you utilize 1 degree of orb or half a degree of orb, you get like half a year on the way into perfection and half a year on the way out, right? So I say all that just to let you know that in a transit, we would look at this very clearly as Venus opposite Saturn, Venus squaring the sun. Solar arc directions, most of us would say that actually has not happened yet. And then interestingly, it will be next year for Venus the solar arc Venus to square the natal sun. There's that, a year and a half. And then another year and a half after that. So 3 years for Venus to kind of perfect the opposition with Saturn. And then that's interestingly synchronized to that timing in 2026, 27 of the Pluto return dates, at least in the tropical zodiac, for the September 4th, 1781 chart that many are utilizing for Los Angeles, right? Now, the time now, like what's up with Pluto at Venus? I mean, interestingly, Pluto is this kind of underworld activator, right? A very significant planet of transformation. Typically, not always, depends on where we are and how willing we are for the change. When Pluto comes knocking, it's kitschy, but I always say choose change before change chooses you. Because Pluto often, who demands change and tends to work through compost style change, will initiate a dark night. Can't say Pluto 4 times without setting Isabel off. Sorry about that. She's going through a lot of Pluto transits. But anyway, like Pluto will take us to the underworld and then bring us back, right? Stronger for the journey, hopefully. So Pluto to Venus in this LA chart is pretty intriguing. And again, this is solar arc directed Pluto. I mean, and look, you notice this, I'm sure, but basically exact this Venus degree, right? 3 arc minutes away. I've cast this is for right now on January 15th, 2025. We could go back a week and very little will have changed because solar arcs move so slowly. Again, everything's moving at a rate of about 1 degree per day. So this would say this has kind of been building up for half a year and it has a half a year left. And, what is being Plutoed? Maybe the beauty of the city, maybe the harmony and balance. It's an interesting thought. Does that mean that this is the LA chart? No, but it maybe is a feather in its cap. And some of you actually specifically called out a Venus-Neptune conjunction in your I wonder if LA chart should have this in it. And this chart has that at least. It's a part of this particular chart that I feel does feel LA, at least in the way that I feel LA. I'm also looking at this Jupiter in Scorpio. There's a lot of magic in that, maybe light and dark. And some other themes. Some of it actually kind of begs for a harmonic analysis. I don't think I'm going there right now. But I am intrigued to know that like back then, and I've seen this before, but there's like a Neptune-Pluto trine and a Uranus-Neptune square that intrigues me. And for me, these like invisible planets are going to come to us and through us via their connections to visible planets like Venus. And at least at midday, the moon really got into all of that too. All right, let's look at our next candidate chart for Los Angeles. Okay, so this is, there's one more thing I wanted to do here, which is just to go back in June, because as we saw in that article, it was like, well, this September 4th date was just like, let me read that cat's name again. When Neve, he just wrote September 4th, an arbitrary date that Neve used in his report to his superiors, right? Now, astrologers don't believe in arbitrary dates, first of all. But, again, what is an incorporation of a city or making a pueblo official or turning a pueblo into a ciudad? But, an official document, oftentimes there's going to be a ceremony, right? And if we have that ceremony in astrology, we'll try to clock that time as like, this is when this city or this country or whatever began, right? But it's a date on a piece of paper in some regards. Okay, so I did want to just go back to June and show you things like, look, Venus was at that time in Cancer. See Venus down there at the bottom of the chart near Uranus. Actually, I just kind of randomly rewound to the Sun-Uranus conjunction of that year. They happen about every year. And so the outer planets, like the far outer planets, are going to be pretty consistent. However, we do get to see that between June of 1781 and September, Uranus changed signs. It's actually just for the sake of the science. Uranus likes that. Catch the date of Uranus's sign change. And that was July 12th, 1781. By the way, Uranus, as we know, this year moving into Gemini, Uranus spends about 7 years in a sign. And so it will be around 2032, 2033 of Uranus, like returning to this degree, 2034, 5 maybe. And a lot of this for me, it begs this question of, okay, these fires are beginning some kind of transformation. Where will that go? All right, well, where we will go next is to look at this 1835 chart. I mean, let's actually look at the 1835 chart. Sorry, what do I want? I want this and that. This is interesting to see, right? So we have this September 4th, 1781 chart. Again, like that article telling us this is just when Neve like arbitrarily chooses a date to put on the paper to send to his superiors. And maybe it wasn't this great march of the pobladores, the townspeople, the 44 founding members that's celebrated annually. And then what about this 1835 time? This is this decree that made the pueblo of Los Angeles now a city, now a ciudad, and declared Los Angeles the capital city of California, right? So interestingly, this name California, which is a Spanish word, it predates the United States. That's not true of many of the states' names, right? I want to actually just read on in this article. Let me share it with you on the screen again so you can see what I see. Do you see what I see? An article about... So we read this. But none mattered as much as the warming sectional rivalry between Alta California, so Northern California, the Aribueños, Northerners, and Abajeños, the Southerners. Monterey, a settlement on the northern coast of Alta California, had been capital since Spain first colonized the province. But as the pueblo of Los Angeles grew in population and economic clout, its residents began to resent the continued primacy of the Montereños. And so when in 1835, Jose Carrillo, a native of Los Angeles, took his seat in the Mexican Congress as Alta California's sole delegate, he pleased his fellow Angelenos by orchestrating the southern migration of the territorial capital. Okay, so interesting, right? It was like, this is like there was north, there was south, there was some edge between them, and it was at this time in 1835, and then specifically we get this May 23rd, 523, wonderful numbers for those of you who love the Fibonacci, on this date in 1835. And so Los Angeles becomes not only a ciudad from official rank of pueblo to ciudad, it's kind of like from town to city, right? But becomes the territorial capital of Alta California, right? So where's Southern California? I think that's called Baja California. I don't know if that's how it was back then, but of course we know Baja California now, south of the United State of California, as the maps are drawn these days, right? And it's part of Mexico still. All right, so this 1835 date is pretty interesting, and let us consider the 1835 date as a transit to the 1781 date, right? So this is when LA becomes a pueblo, at least when the document is stamped. And then here's the pueblo becoming a ciudad and becoming the capital of Alta California. So again, be careful. Let's just look at this chart. Be careful with the moon, right? In this case, the moon is also moving slow. I can tell because the moon is near Lilith, and Lilith marks the point where the moon is furthest from Earth each month, each anomalistic month. So it's a slow moon moving at about 12 degrees per day, right? So if we add 6 to this, we get Aries. If we subtract 6 from this, we get Aries. So in this case, we can at least ensure that this is an Aries moon on this chart. Whereas before, we don't know if the moon was in Pisces or Aries, right? I mean, interestingly, many said Pisces, said Neptune when you came in before. We saw in the 1781 chart, Neptune strong just through the proximity with Venus, maybe with the moon. We don't know in that 1781 chart. We don't have a time, right? Here we see really strong Neptune. How? How does Neptune jump out from this chart? Anyone want to say? How does Pluto jump off this screen? And this, by the way, really speaks to the importance of aspects. Yeah. So let's do this in an LA way. All right. So this is one of my favorite metaphors for teaching astrology. I've for personally kind of experienced planets like instruments and signs like the note that they're playing and the aspects like the harmonies that they arrange and the chords that they together create. But one of the metaphors we often use to help students synthesize charts, because you have so many different things working at once, wheels within wheels, right? And even just in very basic kind of one chart astrology, we have planets, we have signs, we have houses, we have aspects. It's much more than that. Dispositorship, on and on we can go, right? Dignity, yada yada. Anyway, how about planets as the actors, actresses, signs as the roles that they play? And by the way, that actually kind of works into the dignity trip. It's the way I like to teach that. Some planets are just typecast for particular signs. Like when you think of Gemini, Mercury plays Gemini super well. Other planets, not so much, right? When Saturn in Gemini, it's got like an interesting thing, right? Like old Father Time and the sign of youth and speed, right? Okay. So yeah, there's this idea that actors and actresses have roles that they can be typecast for. That would bring in dignity, but again, planets as actors, actresses, signs as the roles that they play, houses as the stages that they're playing on. And with untimed charts, we just don't have houses to work with. But aspects like the relationships between the actors. And some characters have, it's the good guy and the bad guy. Some of them are allies. Some characters are lovers, right? So what kind of relationships are those? How do relationships change, right? So we're really looking at aspects in that part of the metaphor. And so we see some things come in like trining the sun, and look at all that Gemini. And go to another place to see some of the comments you may have shared. You write similar things. We get, look at all that Gemini. And Uranus becomes particularly relevant in this chart because of this relationship with the sun. So we have Sun conjunct Chiron, which is interesting to consider, right? There medicine to be found in some kind of wounds. Does the power of the Gemini nature here really speak to that kind of two-worldness that a few of you mentioned before? Nadine, I'm thinking of your comment in particular, but there were others who really kind of spoke about that. And we want Neptune to have strength, and here we do. And by the way, Uranus as well. So Uranus in Pisces may be a little less Piscean than Neptune in Pisces. Some modern astrologers would look at this like a mutual reception, right? They think of Pisces as a Neptunian thing and Aquarius as a Uranian thing. And so you have these two planets kind of operating in each other's realms. By the way, at this time, Uranus had been discovered, but Neptune had not yet. We were like working on the math. But we see the sun strongly configured to both of them, and that's kind of an intriguing thing. I mean, certainly what's going on right now is a very Uranian event, right? It can bring accidents, sudden change, oftentimes through traumatic experience, not always. Neptune can bring dream disillusion, also illusion vision. Do we have strong Venus here? I want to ask that question. And while I'm waiting for some answers to come in, let me also just say things like, well, this is eclipse season, right? So how do we know? Because the sun is near the node. There's going to be a solar eclipse that follows 4 days after this May 23rd, 1835 event. There's that Gemini Mercury, which some of you had called out specifically. Maybe strong Gemini can even speak to the amount of traffic and such. I don't know. Some of you had called out Leo. We didn't really see Leo indicated in this 1781 chart, did we? Oh, sorry, I'm wrong. Mercury in Leo. And that's interesting. Mercury in Leo trining the North Node, somewhat configured to Jupiter by square. I want to just see if Mercury has parallels he does to Chiron in that 1781 chart. We're going to look at these two charts together as well. But let's go back here again. And here we have Mars in Leo. Mercury with a really strong trine with that Mars. And I'm kind of seeing a midpoint situation here that I want to just ask the nerd dial to show me. Like, I'm wondering where the Venus-Mars midpoint is, and the answer is Jupiter. So Jupiter is almost exact the Venus-Mars midpoint in this 1835 chart. I'm intrigued by that because one of the reasons for a lot of Aries that was mentioned in chat, and I would call this a lot of Aries. Again, a guaranteed Aries moon, Pluto in sign, strongly configured to Saturn, to Jupiter, to Mars, Venus in Aries as well. Part of that, people said, like, I, me, mine, but like the cutting edge, the new thing, and new what? New art, right? I mean, and by the way, how about leading ladies? It's not like LA is where that was born. Yes? Like, that's been happening since the days of opera and likely well before, right? But that's kind of an interesting image of Aries Venus. I'm looking at Venus's speed at this time and trying to see if she's near what we call maximum elongation, and she's not. But this is a very high and bright morning star. For some reason, I can't keep myself from saying the truth that in Roman times that was called Lucifer. Venus is a bright morning star, the light bringer. Interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if Venus was near an angle in the chart, also kind of emphasizing Venus for Los Angeles, or Neptune, or both. But again, I'm not going to try to rectify a time right now. We're just looking at these different dates and trying to consider kind of the current fires, the current tragedy, trauma, and maybe looking to see what might that bring. What kind of transformation might that open up? Nadine writes about portraying female power, bringing women's issues to the forefront, right, which is something that's happened. I mean, in DC, by the way, for sure. Some of you might not feel that's true today, but it certainly is. In New York, in Los Angeles, in a huge way, right? I'm just here kind of looking at parallels, by the way. I'm looking at Mercury parallel Jupiter. I'm not looking at moon because we don't know where the moon is, but Mars, Neptune intrigues me. So there's Leo, Mars. And there's kind of like, I don't love to do Venus equals a girl and Mars equals a boy. Right? But for those of you who do, it's kind of interesting to see this leading lady and this kind of leading fella here. And then I like Jupiter as a voice of opportunity through a very kind of language-based sign like Gemini in between the two, right? Again, this is Jupiter equals almost exactly the Venus-Mars midpoint. Within 3 arc minutes, at least at 12 p.m. on this day, Venus and to some extent Mars move fast enough that that's going to change by some arc minutes during this day. But it's a really intriguing part of this chart that I hadn't noticed when I just took a peek at it last night. Because, you know, again, like a Leo Mars and Aries Venus with the Gemini stuff in between, it kind of seems to fit the bill. And by the way, like, it also sounds to me like this LA becoming the capital city of Alta California then. Right? It's like this, it's like LA's now, quote unquote, on the big screen, like on the stage, right? Like literally taking the capital away from Monterey, where it had been for so long for Alta California, right? So interesting. Kat, I see that you are here, another dear friend in Los Angeles. I hope you're okay. and safe and all that. I'm sure you have many friends who are displaced and the like, and just wanting to send you love. And would love to. I'm excited to see your reflections on what we're looking at here together in charts, because in LA, singer, actress, etc., and an astrologer. All right. We see here female and masculine energies don't have to have a body part, right? Cool. But does Venus have to be female? Does Mars have to be masculine? I was just like, let's not get into that debate today. All right. But I do want to honor that Julie writes here that Venus women were strong settler workers too. Yeah, it's kind of interesting to, like, a lot of times in the, I don't know, myth of this land, we think of people riding west on covered wagons, and that's kind of like the Oregon Trail, right? A gold rush coming, to San Francisco area and further north, like what brought folks to LA. And just remember, like, this whole colonial thing, at least for this state where I reside, like, it started with the Spanish here, right? So, like, a lot of folks came in different ways, and they were often kind of cultured to think. I just want to share that. So, okay, strong Mercury. Why would I say that? Because Mercury typecast in Gemini. Mercury here under the beams of the sun, which I'm kind of intrigued by, because that can really help the trickster be the trickster. And that's, for me, a very significant part of LA. I'm intrigued by the strong connections of the sun to both Uranus and Neptune. I would assume, by the way, that this May 23rd, 1835 was a daytime chart, kind of emphasizing the nature of the sun. And yeah, I think there's a lot to this one. So just checking in with chat to see if y'all want to add anything. Where we're going next is looking at the Ciudad de Los Angeles in 1835 in respect to this Pueblo chart from September 4th, 1781. And how about this? Neptune at Pluto. Now, what would it mean for Neptune to transit Pluto? It's interesting, but none of us know, right? Because for a long time, many of you will know this, that, so Nadine says LA started with the Chumash. I want to respond to that. There is so much in a name, right? So I have to imagine that the Chumash did not call Los Angeles, since those are Spanish words, right? Still, there was something there before. I spoke to that before. Hard to say, right? What is the history there? And Nadine, you had mentioned a book before, so maybe you could share something more specific in that regard. If I change a name, do I become someone new? That's an interesting question. If I do, should I have a new birth chart based upon when my new name was either dreamed in, or I decided it was my new name, or if I made that official? Those are interesting questions, right? So as I mentioned at the very beginning here, it's going to be difficult for me to get to charts for what LA was before it was LA. But it is interesting that we have these 3 different charts for LA, at least, to explore. And I'd love to explore earlier charts if we have them. Right. So you may know that in the early 1980s, might have started in the late 70s, but definitely in the early 1980s, Pluto was actually closer to the sun than Neptune, right? It defies the posters you were shown in elementary school. But the thing is, Pluto has such an extremely eccentric orbit, that means elliptical orbit, that there are parts of Pluto's path about the sun that are much closer to the sun, and therefore also to us, than other parts of Pluto's path, right? So on average, like if we think of Pluto's orbital path as a circle, and it certainly is not a circle, but if we think of it as a circle, on average, Pluto's path is further from the sun than Neptune's. But because of the extreme eccentricity, meaning elliptical nature of Pluto's orbit, there are places of Pluto's orbit that are actually closer to the sun than Neptune's orbit. Neptune, by the way, has a rather circular orbit, one of the most harmonic circular. Interestingly, Neptune is often considered by astrologers these days to be a higher octave of Venus. I imagine you've heard that. Uranus is a higher octave of Mercury. Pluto is a higher octave of Mars. Neptune is a higher octave of Venus. Well, Venus has an incredibly circular orbit, the most circular of the team. It's why, by the way, Venus cycles tend to be rather uniform, rhythmic, like the Venus star. I imagine you've seen when you try to do this with Mars, the whole thing's quite chaotic. When you try to do this with Mercury, there are shapes, but they're quite eccentric. We should expect chaos with Mars, eccentricity with Mercury. Yes, Mercury is a very eccentric orbit, and that's true for Mars as well. I just prefer to call it chaotic. But once you get out to Pluto, things are both. All right. And again, in very early 1980s, I believe, and may have started in the late 1970s, maybe some of you know, please educate me. Pluto actually was closer to the sun than Neptune for a short period of time. Why am I sharing all this? Because Pluto basically has been around the same distance from the sun as Neptune generally lives. So what? So that means that they have been moving at like the same pace. If you're looking at charts of people who are alive, you will see that they have Neptune sextile Pluto. Pluto, as we know, has just moved into Aquarius, right, over the last couple of years. What happens this year and next? Neptune into Aries, Aries, Aquarius sextile. With Neptune, by the way, in the leading sign of that sextile, meaning Aries is zodiacally ahead of Aquarius. I have such a hard time when I say things that aren't exactly precise. So let me just add, at least according to the secondary motion, the orbital motion, right? Planets will move through Aquarius before they get to Aries, and it's not like Pisces doesn't exist, right? So an interesting thing that we see in this chart, and this is why I'm sharing all of this, is that, like in Pueblo de Los Angeles, like going back to 1781, Pluto and Neptune at that time were trine, not sextile. And Pluto was in like a more zodiacally advanced sign, right? So Neptune's going to have to go through the rest of Libra, through Scorpio, through Sagittarius, through Capricorn before it gets to Aquarius. And that had happened between this September 4th, 1781 date and this May 23rd, 1835 date. Okay, so why still am I talking about 1980? Because none of us will experience Neptune transiting Pluto. I'm checking in again to see if that's true. Will anybody get that? I don't, maybe folks born in the 30s actually got that one. It'd be interesting. Like it's just something I would love for us to pursue. Anyway, I can assume and apply our symbolic code to assume what that might mean, but I don't know of many I don't think I know of any personal antidotes. I don't think I've ever seen it in a reading. I've done thousands of readings now with people. So what might we expect it to say? Pluto and Aquarius, intriguing, right? If we use this September 4th, 1781 Pueblo de Los Angeles chart as some kind of root chart, and actually even offer that chart as an opportunity to contemplate Pluto in Aquarius, right? So again, Stephen, you're an hour late, as you admit, and so I'm going to have to say all this again. Just kidding. I was going to do it anyway, and I appreciate the excuse. Thank you, sir. Which is that in 1776, the Declaration of Independence that many use as the chart for the United States. I mean, interestingly, usually we're looking at charts of when places become independent, not when they say they're independent. and start a war for their independence and the like. That happens all the time, right? So why don't we use those charts for other places? It intrigues me. Regardless, if we use that 1776 chart, we find Pluto in very late degrees of tropical Capricorn. Yes. And hence many screaming about the Pluto return for the United States in recent years when Pluto was in those late degrees of Capricorn again. For the first time since 1776, by the way, right? Pluto has, generally speaking, a 250-year transit of the zodiac, 248, but who's counting? Pluto and Neptune, by the way, they play in this rhythm. 3-2. So Neptune's about 150 years. Neptune gets around 3 times in the amount of time it takes Pluto to go twice. Not 150 years. Neptune's about 165 years, right? 165 times 3 is 495. We divide that by 2. And we get what? For those of you who speak music, by the way, this would be the relationship of the musical fifth. It's in Mercury's code as well. 165 times 3 divided by 2. I'm really having a hard time with the calculator. 247 and a half years, right? So 3 Neptunes equals 2 Plutos. It's like an intriguing thing to consider. It's in the code. Now, if you believe the myth of the United States and this idea of the new world and this vision of equality and justice for all, it gets hard to believe that myth when you read the history, right? But if you believe that vision was true and would lead to things like, things, okay, then is it more alive in the independence chart, the Declaration of Independence, or is it more alive in the Constitution? And I think most of them would say Constitution. Now, for those of you who identify Aquarius as a Uranian thing, well, maybe revolution would be as Aquarian as it gets. I think of Uranus as revolutionary. I don't necessarily think of Aquarius as that. I'd like to think of Aquarius as something that might stimulate a revolution or the ideal of what we hope we will achieve through revolution. You never get it, but doesn't mean you shouldn't try. But, the Constitution very much has those Aquarian ideals. Like free speech. What's wrong with you if you think we shouldn't have it? This isn't the channel for you if you don't. Morgana just comes in with, my mother was born in 1898 and did have Neptune conjunct Pluto. Thank you so much for that. Awesome. Appreciate it. Cool. And you're an astrologer, and you had a very close relationship with your mother. So maybe at another time, or maybe you want to share, do you remember any particular experiences that seemed indicative of Neptune transiting a natal Pluto when that went down that you feel like sharing here? Please do not feel pressured to. Okay. So Pluto in Aquarius, which is our time now, and we can go into the Terminator Skynet fear zone. We're looking at this amazing acceleration of artificial intelligence. I mean, in some ways, and look, it was in the United States where the Wright brothers thing went down. When Stanley Kubrick first got to the moon, when we first got to the moon, of course, what about Russia, right? Like, let's not leave them out of the space race and all that. But there has been quite a significant amount of Aquarian advancement here in the United States. I don't want to get super nationalist on us or believe those things aren't happening elsewhere at all, right? But look, the internet, right? Personal computers, like so much of this age of Aquarius dawning is very clear to see, and things are just rapidly advancing, right? They kind of look at like Terence McKenna's time wave zero theory, right? Where things just advance and advance, and the information doubles in this much time, and the amount of time it takes for the information to double gets cut in half or a tenth, and then suddenly it's just all happening at once, right? It kind of really feels like we're in that time, and it's hard not to be afraid of some of that stuff. This Aquarius Pluto thing, Pluto can ask us to address our fears. So looking at things like these mysterious drones in the sky, not just in New Jersey, but all over the place, right? Anyway, it's an interesting thing to contemplate. What are the beautiful sides? We would love to see Pluto as an image of power and Aquarius as an image of the people, talking about power to the people and power by and of the people and these kinds of things. And by the way, again, if we looked at the chart for the U.S. Constitution in 1783, we're going to see that Aquarius Pluto. It's weird that I haven't even tripped on this yet. I'm just seeing that in the 1781 chart. The Constitution, by the way, is 1787. So, but we do see in the U.S. Constitution, let me put that chart on the screen. So September 17th, 1781. We actually have a time for this, but I'm just going to leave it on the zero Aries wheel because I'm not trying to spend too much time here anyway. We see Pluto actually in the middle degrees of Aquarius with Saturn there as well. But I just wanted to kind of go there because it really feels to me that, let's say all people created equal. We really get to feel what we'd like to see is an Aquarian spirit. And we see that here in this LA chart as well, right? Well, what might and the Aquarian spirit lead to? Now, for those of you who spend some time in the Scorpio detective space, as I do, look into these 15-minute cities or 10-minute cities and these kind of 5G beehives that are in the vision of the technocrats. And there's a little bit of fear of what might be happening to the future of Lahaina, for example, and of Los Angeles. And even hearing some of the governor's statements about the meetings that are being held right now for a better LA, and some of the conspiracy rumors around shifting from the type of zoning already that's happening through the political process and yada yada yada. Okay, so I told you I'm not going to go there so much today. I'll do my best, but I would say look into those stones. Okay, anyway, what might this suggest? And not only is it Pluto in Aquarius, but when we have planets so strongly connected by trine, and again, we don't know the time here in September 4th, 1781. We're not even sure, as we saw in that article, is this the actual time or some just random date that was chosen? Well, they said people started showing up in June. We still had Neptune trining Pluto. Let's, even for the sake of the science, look at Neptune trine Pluto and see when that perfected. And it already happened, by the way, more than thrice. There were all of these dates of Neptune trining, transiting Pluto. At some point, I'm going to push this button. It's going to take us back to the previous ones, to the opening trines of this cycle. Well, we're back in 1741. Then there's going to be a Neptune-Pluto. Let's see, a conjunction was, the conjunction of the cycle was in... the computer can't handle it. It doesn't go back far enough in time. So hold on, let me try this again. Anyway, what I was just seeing, I was kind of surprised to see how many of these trines, just through the consecutive kind of retrogradation of the two planets, that they stayed trine for a long time. And it makes me even wonder if that was just another time when Pluto was similar in distance from the sun as Neptune was. I can't resist, friends. I have to go take a look, and there's a way for me to do that now in astrological software. So please pardon my curiosity. We are going to look at this app size. Where are you? And we can then get Pluto distance. Yes, see how they're similar, but also not. All right, like I think if we look at now, we're going to see the distance of Neptune and Pluto much more similar, and they're really not. I'm somewhat surprised, as you can hear. I want to go back to like 1980. And see about then. Yeah, right. So that was the time when the Neptune-Pluto distance was about the same as I had shared before. So it's interesting to see how much they've separated since then, but they've just kind of held this sextile. All right, last thing I'm going to do. Okay, sorry about all that. I can't. Sometimes I have to pull the threads. So the amount of trines these beings were making with one another, and I think you probably noticed as I went back in time here, back to 1776. So that's intriguing because our conversation has brought us there more than once. Neptune, Pluto trine, and then they trine each other. It's our October 27th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. There's like 21 or 22 Neptune Pluto trines back then. That's crazy. I really wish I had caught where the last one went down. But I just had to push the button so many times. Okay, the last one was in 1786, and it was also then. Right, so this is the U.S. Constitution coming 1787. I just learned Neptune, Pluto. Right, so it makes sense. It makes sense that there is a quest to move into a new game. Students of mine will be very familiar that I often teach Capricorn as the rules of the game, and if the rules are good, the game is good. Then the role of Aquarius then. Right, these two neighboring signs that share a planetary guide, right? Saturn traditionally, both Capricorn and Aquarian. If the rules of the game Capricorn are good, then Aquarius responds by innovating within that structure, right? And the example I always offer is chess. Like the rules are good. You can do a lot. You can play chess forever with those rules. It's amazing. But Aquarius has become like chessers who know that thing better than I do. I just learned how to solve the Rubik's Cube. Takes me a few minutes now, right? Well, best time was like a minute and a half. People do that in 4 seconds. Go watch Rubik's Cube world record people. It's a whole amazing thing. I'm perplexed by it right now. I'm going to have to do like a storytelling hour investigation of the Rubik's world. But like they're just like, and it's done. It's crazy, right? Well, they have innovated. The Rubik's Cube is the Rubik's Cube. Now, amazingly, if you look at the math, it is wild. There are more potential permutations of Rubik's Cube, just in that 3x3 sided cube, than there are grains of sand on Earth. It's wild. Look into it if you'd like. Maybe we'll do it here in Nerd Hour together sometime. Why am I sharing all of that? Still the rules of the Rubik's Cube are pretty limited, right? You have an X, Y, and Z axis, and you can turn things in those axes. And I've learned this beginner's method to solve it. and you memorize a few algorithms and you apply them, and it's fun. I think it's fun. It becomes quite addictive. I'm not the first to have experienced that. These cats who are solving this in 4 seconds. I mean, first of all, they've really done a lot technically and perfected some, hand techniques, and they're using all their fingers, but they know like hundreds of different algorithms to apply to the Rubik's Cube based upon how it is scrambled, right? And I'm just suggesting that that's a very Aquarian response to a Capricornian thing, all right? If the rules of the game are lame, then the Aquarian response is to revolt. So why am I sharing all of this? In this interesting time in 1781, and what? We're talking American Revolution, French Revolution is brewing, the Industrial Revolution, all of these things that really speaks to what? The discovery of Uranus. And by the way, it was 1781. I hadn't mentioned this before, but the discovery of Uranus was, I believe, was shortly before this September 4th, 1781 date that we have for the Pueblo of Los Angeles, right? So is there something Uranian? Is there something new, innovative, revolutionary? Is there that spirit? We already see this kind of revolutionary takeover of Monterey as the capital of Alta California that took a little time. And we're going to, again, kind of look at that time. And of course, this is this time of this revolution where many of, well, let's just say secret society ideals led to colonialism. But there's a hope that that was a terrible nightmare that was utilized as a tool to lead to a great awakening. And that those who saw the dream of this awakening understood that the nightmare was the only way that it would come about. I hesitate to even speak that type of language. Nadine, thank you for adding here that I imagine this is for the discovery of Uranus. Please, complete sentences, people. But thank you, because I believe Nadine's telling us that Uranus was discovered March 13th, 1781. I almost brought up the chart, but I'm not. So, I mean, fascinatingly, on the heels of that, we get this Pueblo de Los Angeles. All right. So is there something in that Uranian spirit? Look at where Uranus was at the time. In March of 1701, when Uranus was discovered, Uranus was in Gemini. And very close to one of Uranus's planetary nodes, by the way. Okay. So now we have Uranus in Cancer. Is this some kind of revolutionary moment for a new home, a new land, something like this, right? Cancer, we might even say like a new culture. What is this Pluto and Aquarius ideal, right? Do we want the opportunity to empower the people, move more towards, and some of you called out Aquarius as how you know LA. I wrote specifically my friends there, right? So, that's a very narrow point of view. Beautiful, whatever, it's yours. That's what matters to me. Like here, we can gather in a collective. We're 40 people. Anyway, we can gather in somewhat of a collective and offer different visions of a place and try to like put those together into maybe a common thing, something that might even kind of contradict, whatever, like get us towards something. Yes? All right. I'm intrigued to see that between the 1781 chart and the 1835 chart, Neptune, who was trine with Pluto at the time of Pueblo, comes to where Pluto was in Aquarius. Because it really does feel as if this dream of like a new way is being actualized. Now look at how far Pluto had moved. And by the way, we see Pluto in trine to the Pueblo's Saturn. You see Venus at the Pueblo's node, and therefore in trine with the Pueblo's Mercury. Okay, well, I think would maybe be better for our time now. I just can't not point out Mercury trining Venus there, right? Is to also bring in a chart for the fires. So we can just do this and go now and put it about a week ago. Yeah, let me go a week and a day. Let's see. Let's even put the moon back in Aries. This might make more sense to some folks. Pacific Palisades fires. There's a report of them at 10:15 a.m. on January 17th. There had been some fires even the week before that were put out. There were some warnings about winds and that, I don't know, we should fill the reservoirs before then. But anyway, so I think an Aries moon kind of makes sense. And at this 10:15 a.m. phone call, look at that Aries moon on the 1835 Venus, which is on the 1781 node. That's an intriguing thing. Look at Mars at the time, retrograde, out of bounds in Cancer, squaring the 1781 nodes, squaring Venus at the time of the 1835 chart. Jupiter returning. That doesn't feel so Jupiter. Jupiter on the node, Jupiter on the Mercury of the 1835 chart. But as I showed before, this Jupiter opposite Saturn, the Jupiter square Sun, Saturn squaring the Saturn of the 1781 chart, Saturn opposite the Sun of the 1781 chart. I mean, the initiation of this fire feels to me more powerfully indicated against the 1781 chart. But let's just be here for a second and look at the fires as a transit to the 1835 Ciudad de los Angeles chart. What jumps off at you? Again, we need to be careful with this moon degree because I'm like, well, look at Chiron transiting that moon. We're not sure that that moon's there. We do see Chiron opposite Saturn. We might expect a lot of Uranus. And, it'd be nice to know more. It'd be nice to have a time because we might see this is Uranus crossing the ascendant. Taurus ascendant might make a ton of sense for LA, for example. But I'm just not going to go there. I'm not going to try to rectify a birth time for LA based on any of these charts and what I think LA is. Is anything really jumping off the screen here? One of you mentions your own personal astrocartography. I could say this Mars occultation has interesting astrocartography for LA, and I think I'll show you that. But I think I'll show you that once we get to our third chart for Los Angeles, was a chart that many use. And that is the April 4th, 1850 chart. Okay, I'm still just checking in to see if anybody had comments about what you're seeing on the charts here. And I see a lot of you saying thanks for this, and I appreciate that. I mean, hopefully this is interesting to you. I don't know that I'm making any great revelations or something here, but hopefully you enjoy exploring this together and looking for something. My intent is by the end to hopefully find some kind of energetic intent and wish. Julian's interested in the Mars to Neptune. So looking at Mars, who had already ingressed Leo, by the way, and Mars opposite Neptune, right? So some of us who are so traditionally inclined see these tall walls between signs, and then we lose sight of the geometries of Mars here opposite Neptune. So I'm very appreciative of you pointing that out, Julian. Thank you. It actually asked me to go look back in time, and we're going to look at where Mars was when be stationed retrograde on December 6th, 2024. And so we can see this kind of Mars return building up for the 1835 Ciudad de los Angeles chart, right? And therefore, Mars, who we know is opposing Pluto 3 times in this retrograde loop. The first was from the last degree of Capricorn to the last degree of, Cancer to Capricorn on November 3rd. And we'll get 2 more of these things. But yeah, this Mars in this loop is opposing this Neptune a few times. And in some ways, it's like the dream Neptune becomes a nightmare through this Martian volatility in fire Leo. I mean, that might be a stretch on trying to apply a literal translation of the astrological symbols, but maybe not. Lorelei asks, when did Mars go out of bounds? Gosh, I was just looking at that last week. We can see quickly. So let me check Mars in the transiting chart. And I'm just looking for declination to become more than 23 and a half. So it's sometime before January. Yeah, it was right around the turning of the calendar year, by the way. And so the fires in LA coming kind of soon after that time, which, it makes me interested in seeing if this chart has any out of bounds planets. It does not. I would expect LA to. Some of what you describe as Aquarius, I think, is well described by out of bounds. The 1781 chart does. Mars is out of bounds in Capricorn. Uranus was out of bounds, and Pluto was out of bounds back then in 1781. That's a kind of an intriguing thing to consider, that this Neptune-Pluto trine was happening between 2 planets out of bounds, so that they were like trine and contra-parallel. Here we see this Neptune. Uranus, Pluto, contra-parallel. Intriguing. And we were looking at Venus and Mars, Aries, Venus, Leo, Mars in the 1835 chart. Well, this just kind of reminded me to point out, look at these strong Venus, right? Libra. Strong Mars, exalted in Capricorn, at least according to the tradition. I don't think it's as close, but okay. I wanted to see if Jupiter was also at the Venus-Mars midpoint in the 1781 chart. It's a ways away. Okay. Anyway. All right, well, let's look at our 4th chart. This is the chart that many use. This is April 4th, 1850. So this is Los Angeles becoming a city of the United States, incorporating as a municipality, even though California was not yet a state. So that's intriguing, right? Let's read a little bit more about that one. Let me bring these articles up again. Buttons. So yeah, LA incorporated as an American municipality several months before California achieved statehood. I was trying to see. I just wanted to show you my reading a screen face. It's never a good look. Never a good look. I thought it was in this article where they talk about the purchase of California as a state, but I'm not seeing it here. And we got other stuff to do anyway. But that would be an interesting part of the puzzle. All right. Let's get back to the charts. So here's this April 4th, 1850. Okay, so for those of you who were looking for Aries, how you doing? Right? Like that. This is Aries. This is incredibly Aries. I mean, interestingly, this shares in common with the 1835 chart, Venus in Aries. Look at Venus Uranus now, right? In this 1781 chart, let's look at all three of these near one another. I'm going to put them in chronological order. And then we are going to do this. I need to stop the screen and just get a yes, we can from one of you. Or actually, I think I can do this. Do we see? We're not seeing all three of these on the screen. Yeah, I suspected that might be the case. Buttons, but there we go. So let's go Pueblo, Ciudad, City. All right, so 1781, 1835. California moving from Los Angeles moving from Pueblo to Ciudad status and becoming the capital of Alta California. And then now Los Angeles incorporating as a city of the United States, April 4th, 1850. Because we can just look at some interesting themes here. Now, the 1835 and the 1850, right, they're very close to one another. So seeing things like, well, Pluto's in Aries for both of them, yes. But well, we see Venus, Pluto, and Aries in the 1835 chart. And again, regardless of the time, the moon would have been in Aries as well. In the 1850 chart, we have everything in Aries. And Venus had gone around a bunch of times. And we see Venus much closer to Pluto and applying to Pluto. But she's going to have to get through Uranus to get there, right? We see these interesting Uranus-Pluto connections. We don't necessarily in the Ciudad chart. We have to get into harmonics to see it there. And by the way, we do. Like if I ask this thing to show me fives, we're going to see a quintile between Neptune and Pluto. And quintiles actually would be an interesting way to look at Los Angeles because they tend towards creativity and play. But let's stick with the old school for today. We do see that trine that we were kind of, I really took a long journey with that. In the Pueblo chart of 1781, Neptune trine Pluto and Venus in the mix. But here in the Los Angeles City chart, we get the Uranus-Pluto conjunction. Now, most of us will remember that next happened, Uranus and Pluto conjoined in 1965, right? A few times in the sign of Virgo. And literally, that's how long it had been since Uranus and Pluto came together, right? Since the mid-1800s to 1965, 67-ish. Sun-Saturn is an intriguing thing in two of these charts, right? Sun square Saturn, the 1781 Pueblo chart, Sun conjunct Saturn, where traditionally the Sun is exalted in Aries and Saturn is in fall in Aries. Venus said to be in exile in the sign of Aries. That's a kind of an interesting statement in some of these charts. Typically for me, that's a statement about kind of counterculture, not typecast. And by the way, look at that for Jupiter. Jupiter in Gemini in the Ciudad chart, Jupiter in Virgo in the City chart. City chart also has Mars in Cancer, like Mars is now. We have a Mars trine Neptune in the City chart. I just want to make the City chart big on your screen here. Buttons, 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 buttons. Let's just tune into that chart. I don't know. I kind of felt like this one was less LA. I'm gonna say my LA, my vision of LA. Again, if I had a time, it would be quite helpful, right? We could explore, oh, our planet's angular and the like, Discerning light, just mentioning the history of the gold rush, right? So, sure, Northern California was where people went. Yeah, but there was also gold discovered in LA, right? That was a thing that went down. Some comments here about San Francisco being first, and so I'm just seeing the kind of chats going on a gold rush there. Let me get some of that. The Golden Gate Bridge and the like, right? So the 49ers. Anyway, kind of interestingly tied to this time for LA City too, right? And the purchase of California. I'm intrigued to see Uranus and Pluto together. It's clearly a change thing. Many of you have called in Aries. I'm just like, I want to see more Neptune. I'm more in that kind of dream delusion, fantasy version of LA. There's other ways for Neptune to get involved. Like I just wanted to click this button to see if Neptune or any of these planets are parallel. And we get Venus, Jupiter, and we get Uranus, Neptune, by the way. But this one feels a little bit less of what I would expect in LA than other charts. However, given this recent, just traumatic, present traumatic event that feels very fiery, and knowing how in this year, how much is happening at the Pisces Aries cusp. The nodes have just crossed over on January 11th, shortly after the fires began. Venus will retrograde across that point. Mercury will retrograde across that point. Saturn and Neptune will retrograde across that point this year. Like it's really activated the east point this year. So we're seeing in the chat some attention, again, Mars in Cancer. It may be Mars here is out of bounds. Let's go look for out of bounds planets like we did for the other ones. And the answer is yes. 25 North 17. Let's see where Mars was by declination at this January 7th time. Yeah, I'm casting here like a phone call. Maybe some of you have a better time. So Mars at that time, a declination 24 North 17, and in the 1850 chart, 25 North 17, so about a degree out. Mars in fall, Moon in fall, Moon, Mars, mutual reception. And so many planets hanging out in Martian zone. I don't know, of these three charts we were looking at, does any of them feel more LA to you? Can we see how maybe all of them have a voice in the mix? Let me get back to the three chart view. Just setting it up for you. Buttons, 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 buttons. Can we work with all of these charts and try to synthesize a vision, a wish? Can we somehow step outside of our own judgments, vibes, even feels, expectations, even experiences of what LA is, and see or ask astrology if these charts, one of these charts, maybe two, maybe all of these charts, have something to say about the intention of this place, Los Angeles. Can we step outside of ourselves and ask the language of astrology to tell us more about what that intention is? I'm not sure I'm capable of that, by the way. And I wish we were in a venue right now where we could be sharing words with one another instead of me just checking in with the chat every now and then. And maybe, by the way, for those of you who are in constellations in the School of Earth Astrology's membership group, maybe that's something that we will do today. It reminds me to say, hey, thank you for liking and sharing this video. It really helps us play and dance with the algorithm, you know. And I hope you know about the School of Earth Astrology's membership group. It's the best in the business. It's only $16. I can definitely say it's the most affordable, especially for what you get. $16 a month. There's a teaching every week. In fact, just in a few hours here at 4 p.m. Pacific time, we will receive a monthly teaching from Amala Hall on plants and planets, astro herbalism, correspondences of plants and planets, specifically through the lens of Capricorn and Saturn. So this will be a great time to sign up. Nadine, I appreciate you telling me to put this on the screen. So you can follow the link that I just put in the chat, geminibrett.com/constellations, or head over to geminibrett.com, or by the way, you can offer a donation if you'd like to. You can book a session with me. You can help me be a dad and support my daughter who's just turned 7 months old, right? Constellations is a great way to connect, to support my work, but to also connect with fellows of like heart and mind. We have regular community discussions. 2 will happen on Friday. I'm hoping to make one of those because for those of you who haven't yet heard, in Constellations, we're not having our typical Saturday meetup. And the reason why is I will be, along with Winter, who is here, and don't see Kevin here today, but with Winter Weldon, with Kevin Mallet, and others, I'm going to be on a panel this Saturday for NCGR San Francisco. I just put a link in the chat, NCGR sanfrancisco.org. I'm on the board there, have been for some time. Carolyn, who I think is here, Winter, Kevin, also on the board with us, Greg, Nell, Michelle Dench, Steve Pincus. Many of us are going to offer those snippets of significant astrological events in this year of 2025. I'll be tuning into the lunar standstills. I've been kind of studying the tides, by the way. I'm excited to share some things that I found in that lens. Kevin will speak about Uranus into Gemini. Michelle will speak about Jupiter squaring the nodes. Winter's going to speak about the Venus Aries cycle. Steve Pincus is going to look at the Uranian astrology point of view, and Greg Nell is going to look at Saturn Neptune, who both crossed from Pisces into Aries this year. So I hope you would join us. It's actually free. I just put that link in, ncgrsanfrancisco.org. Head over there and you will find the link where you can learn more about this event on Saturday, January 18th. It starts at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Register for free. If you can't make it live and you are a member of our chapter, just register and we'll send you a recording. If you're not a member of our chapter, you can just send a donation of $10 or more anytime this month. All right, so there's that. What I'm seeing in these charts, I try to get them together to tell me a story and to also consider this time now. Again, as I said before, I kind of can't get myself and what I believe LA to be out of it. I'm really appreciating this 1835 chart. I want to see strong Uranus. I want to see strong Neptune. There's so much change, innovation, especially, like this Uranus and Pisces. It's like innovation in the ways of vision. Just like thinking about like Disneyland, Oh God. Sorry, I didn't mean to go there. Anyway, thinking about this Aquarius Neptune, right? It just, I feel so much of Hollywood in there, and just like the pop world. I mean, seeing some of the entanglements of Pluto. That Saturn-Pluto opposition reminds me of 9/11, actually. Seeing the placements of the lunar nodes, who at that time were aligned to the royal stars, Antares and Aldebaran, seeing that Gemini Mercury, seeing that Jupiter between Venus and Mars. I mean, I'm really kind of gravitating towards that chart. But if I try to speak of, like, if I try to just hear them all, there really is this clear statement of starting something new. And when I see just kind of the loud Aries that happens, like we see it in all the charts in some regards, but especially in this 1850 chart. And I don't know, some of us maybe would be more inclined to see the I, me, mine in the United States version. I'd like to break out of that spell personally, though. There is innovation. There is something new. What I'm looking to see, and I really wish we had times and we could see some houses. And you know what? We don't need to. A togetherness, a cooperation. I mean, this isn't the time. I think in one of our community discussions that actually I'm hosting at Constellations, we'll go a little bit into some of the darker side of this. We'll go into some of the why was that reservoir empty and for so long? How has this just mismanagement potentially led to this disaster? Should we blame it all on climate change, right? Is there poor governance here? How will people respond? Will this be an opportunity that helps people kind of put down division, or will it amp it up? It's fascinating to look at the red conspiracy theories versus the blue conspiracy theories of the same topic. I highly recommend it. It is a really intriguing thing to go explore. And so this might be something to do together. And, I'm going to put this up, and I really appreciate this discerning light, right? So before, people were kind of like, I, me, mine. How about I am? I'm actually very much appreciating that discerning light as I'm putting together some slides for the astrology of 2025 for this happening on Saturday that I just described, because it's really going to help me speak to this Pisces Aries cusp in a way that matters. So there's an opportunity here. And by the way, I mean, it's necessary in many of these things that LA was. Like, they're not as successful as they once were. There's in some of this, maybe we could say, like, because of Aquarius, because of the internet, like there's less of a monopoly on entertainment, for example. So much of this needs to be revisioned. This is an opportunity where, for example, it's a very different story, or is it? No, none of us are watching the news. I shouldn't speak for you. It's not the news. It's propaganda. And so you can just look at the ratings. It's like falling out the floor. Will they adapt? Will somebody decide to make a real news channel? I mean, there's a lot of independent things that I'd prefer to watch. Personally, I think that's true for many of us, There's always an opportunity in the fall to climb not only back to where I was, where we were, where it was before, but to even take a different route into a different place. So Ashley writes here, like, yeah, it's interesting. Los Angeles is kind of like losing its relevance at the same time. Julie writes, are the Olympics coming to LA? I mean, that's what they say, and we will see. Yes, I mean, an interesting thing is in American football, I speak it that way because Julie's in New Zealand. The Los Angeles Rams made it to the playoffs. Should have been the Seahawks. Anyway, And they had to move their game on Monday from Los Angeles. They ended up playing it in Arizona. So they kind of lost their home field advantage or whatever. Cat's writing here Olympics, World Cup, and more. Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see how Los Angeles responds to this. It's going to be interesting to see how California responds to this. It's going to be interesting to see how the United States responds to this. It's going to be interesting to see how people respond to this. And hopefully our journey together today, though, like, I can't tell you what it is, what it isn't. Hopefully our journey together today has just added some new insights, some new opportunities for contemplation, has offered some charts for you to go spend some time with and look to. Again, for those of you who are in constellations, and come on in, y'all. Let's look at this. Let's look at it also in a place where there is no censorship, which I'm not in that place right now. All right. Yeah, so there's a statement here about rebuilding with new types of materials. Intriguing. All right. I always want to get somewhere like wise, important. I don't know that I'm capable of that. I certainly feel like I haven't gotten here, but maybe you have, and hopefully this has been worth your time. All right. Thanks so much for spending some time with me here today. The present of your presence is an amazing gift, and I very much appreciate having the opportunity to unwrap it. I'm so happy to have amazing, activated, interesting, awakening, weirding people here who are contributing information in the chat. Thank you so much for that. And if you want to give something back, you can do so at GeminiBrett.com. Brett with twin T's, of course. And you can find there a place to book a session with me. I can't tell you how much I would love to tune into the song of your soul with you. You can find a donation link. You can find some videos of stuff that have been up there for some time. On and on we go. All right. See you in space. By the way, I said this at the beginning, and I'll make a scheduled thing so it's more evident. I am going to move Storytelling Hour from 11:11 a.m., where it has been, to 11:33 a.m. Pacific time on Wednesdays, Miércoles, Mercury's Day, because our baby Maya is now with us in like a music together class that's going to meet on 10 Wednesdays. So fun today. She got to like really interact with babies for the first time, other babies. It's good times. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And may water come to quench these fires in Los Angeles. May tenderness come to embrace all people in this world who are unsafe, afraid, and displaced. See you in space.